Joe was, I think, an intuitive storyteller. He just felt it, you know. Once again, he just knew what was working and what wasn't working. And people often said that Joe was the storyteller with heart. You know,
Yeah.
he really knew where to hit you. You know, he really knew how to bring that tear to your eye.
Zero
So
in.
so yeah, he got that. You know, and there was something about his work that always had that sweetness and that charm to it. And I think that's what made Joe Ranft different, was that he gave every Pixar film that little added bit of heart, you know. And we think of Disney films that way too, you know, that Disney films have a lot of heart. You know, people say they're corny and all that, but I think that stuff's important, you know. And even Walt would say, I want a film that will make me laugh and that'll make me cry. And I think Joe had that in his work, you know. And you look at Joe's work and the films he touched, there's always stuff in there that'll make you laugh, make you
Yeah.
laugh out loud, and that'll also bring a tear to the eye,
Yeah.
you know. Even when you know it's coming. I mean, that's the part that gets me. Even when you know what's happening, and it's always he's going for the tear jerking moment now. He's going for it. I'm going to resist, but he gets you anyway, and
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
find yourself kind of like, oh, gee, you know, you know. Well, I would talk to Joe after work. I would find Joe Ramp in the evening, and I would talk to Joe and you know, and just seek his wise counsel. You know, like, Joe, this is what's going on. Can you give us some advice? Can you help us? You know, and at first Joe was reluctant, and because he was already tired from just finishing Bug's Life, and he didn't want to be bothered. But I just kept pestering poor Joe. Like, Joe, you got to help us, you know.
Yeah.
You got to come in. And eventually, I think John Lasseter pretty much dragged Joe onto the film as co-head of story.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the film is just so solid today, you know. I mean, when I saw the film, when it was finally completed, I mean, I'd been watching the film throughout its production, story reels and all of that, but when I saw the finished film, when everything was completed and in color with a score, I was just blown away. Like, this is a darn good film, you know.
Yeah.
This story is solid. There are a few films where I can't find anything wrong with the story, and that's one of the few films that's really solid.
Really? And you think Joe had a lot to do with
I
pulling
think
that
I
together?
think I think Joe had a huge part in making that film work, you know.
What were some of the, do you remember specifically any of the things that he did that helped stitch it more tightly together?
Well, it's hard, you know, the film is such an organic thing. It's kind of hard to think about specifics, but I just think his touch is felt throughout the film. I think that sense of the heart and the charm and the humor, you know, the gentle humor in some cases. That's all Joe, you know. He knows how to tell a story.
So would he, as story director, would he just supervise, or would he board some of the sequences himself, or redo sequences that others had done? What?
I think we were in such a crunch on Toy Story 2. I don't think Joe had time to do any boarding. He had them act mainly as a supervisor. Now, we had marshaled, I think, everybody who could draw at Pixar to do boards, because so much of the picture had to be reboarded and reboarded, you know, quickly.
Yeah.
So everybody who could do boards were just scrambling to get stuff
All hands
reboarded.
on
All
deck.
hands on deck, exactly. And I think Joe was just sort of overseeing this whole process.
Huh.
So it was a huge enterprise, you know, to get this picture turned around and to do so in record time.
What's your most single memorable experience from Monsters? Do you remember any that leap out at you?
I do remember that. Because of the lack of space was becoming apparent at Pixar, and we had pretty much run out of office space. So when I went up to Pixar to work, I had to move into a conference room to do my storyboards, because there were no more empty offices. And then few days later, Joe Ranft moves in, because it turns out that Joe had given up his office while he was on vacation, and so he returned to Pixar,
And there was no office
and no
for
office
him.
for him. And he's like the top story guy. So I can say that Joe and I shared an office on Monsters Incorporated.
A large conference room.
A large conference room, and so that
Was he in one corner and you in another, or how did that work?
I was kind of. I remember he was behind me. I remember being sort of up front in the conference room, and Joe was at a table behind me.
Yeah.
And I remember him one day grumbling about a particular sequence that he was really having difficulty with. And I thought, wow, Joe's having difficulty. I thought only I had difficulty.
You thought it was only you.
I thought it was just me, But it turned out that the sequence he was working on ended up being a very funny one in the film. And it's where they're up at the North Pole or wherever, and they meet the abominable snowman,
Yeah.
voiced by John Ratzenberger.
Yeah.
And
Well, they always get him somewhere.
yeah, they always get John in there somewhere, but it turned out to be a very funny sequence. But I do recall Joe having problems, storyboarding that sequence. And that's when I realized that, gee, maybe Joe's fallible after all.
He's human like everybody else.
Yes, he's human just
He
like
can
the
have
rest of us.
bad days and good days.
Yeah. But no, it was a great experience, and I really enjoyed working on the film, and it was fun.